Shalom everyone, Marcus DeCosta here, and I wanted to discuss with you today words, why they're important in our everyday walk and why they're important with our walk with Messiah. Now, you may be familiar with the word weekend, right? We use it all the time. Like if you are working, you may ask someone the question, when you go back to work, how was your weekend? You may meet someone, when you're going out shopping to get your food, how was your weekend? What are you actually saying when you say this? And this is just an example. What you're actually saying is, how was that period of time at the end of the week? That's what you're saying. So if you say to someone, how was your weekend? How was that period of time at the end of the week? Now the connotations for saying that is that they had that time off. Maybe they'd gone out and you didn't see them, because usually the weekend is a time that people have off. And yet you may say that phrase whilst at the same time believing that it wasn't the weekend. It was actually the beginning of the week. Let me put this and help myself to explain it and for you to understand. If you are a believer and you search the scriptures, and you search the scriptures from Genesis 1, what you will find is that on the seventh day, that was the day of rest. That is in Hebrew is the Shabbat, the Sabbath, however you want to call it, Shabbat. It's the day of rest. That's the end of the week. Because after the Sabbath, the Shabbat, then you go back to the first day of the week. Now in the UK, in the English language, we would say that the Sabbath, according to the scriptures, is from Friday evening at sundown to Saturday evening at sundown. That is your weekend. And yet, when we speak in English and we're talking about the weekend, what we're actually saying is Friday evening, when we typically leave the office or leave from work, wherever you work, until we go back to work on Monday. But if the seventh day, which is your weekend, starts Friday evening to Saturday evening, then Saturday evening to Sunday evening is actually the first day of the week. That's actually the beginning of the week. So every day as believers, especially if you observe the Sabbath, we use terms like weekend when really it's the beginning of the week. Now, if we take that example and wrap it up into a theological mindset, a theological position, in the scriptures, there is this process in real life which is called semantic change, and it affects the scriptures, semantic drift. When you read a word in the King James Bible, for example, it may appear to you in your modern day eyes to mean one thing when it actually means another. Why is this important? It's important because if you're reading the Bible from a modern day mindset and modern day position, you may come out with the wrong conclusion. So if you are, in the example that I gave, hearing the phrase weekend without understanding what a week actually is and where it begins and where it ends in the Bible, you won't understand that that term, how we use that term biblically, is incorrect. I'll give you the reason why this is important. We're commissioned to minister the gospel. We're commissioned to minister the gospel to the four corners of the earth. And yet, because of this semantic change and the redefinition of words, there are some languages that actually take a biblical term and have placed upon it a pagan connotation, a pagan meaning. So for example, if you look at the term in the English called Passover, in English Passover, and you see that in the King James Bible, you will find that from a Christian perspective, people, based upon their belief system, have transitioned from Passover to something called Easter, which is actually something totally different. And we're not going to go into that today. But you have the two terms, Passover in English, and you have the term Easter in English. However, if you go into and speak to someone in another language, for example, Spanish, for example, Portuguese, for example, Italian, many of these other languages do not have a different word for Passover or for Easter. It's the same word. So in their version of the Bible, when it says Passover, it says Pesach or something along those lines. But when they are saying Passover or Pesach or however it's pronounced in that language, their mind is seeing Easter. Why? Because that's the definition that they've been given. That's the modern day use of their language. So you now teaching people about the Torah, the law, the prophets, the Hebraic roots of the faith, and you're using terms like Passover, and you're using terms like Pesach, or any other kind of terms. We have to be very diligent to draw people back to the original meaning of the word. Because in their language, Sunday or Passover, for example, if I continue with that example, means Easter, and Easter means Pesach. It's important, brothers and sisters, as believers, that we go back to what it was in the beginning, the Hebraic roots of our faith, not the Jewish roots, not the Christian roots, the Hebraic roots. Because if we go back to what was there in the beginning, and I'm referring to when Yeshua came, because Yeshua tells us and teaches us and shows us what was there in the beginning, because he was there in the beginning, then we come to understand the power of the words that we've been using, how they've been cloaking our understanding of the faith, how at times when we can clearly see in the English Bible where it says Easter, it actually should say Passover. And those are the kind of things which we as believers, A, we need to understand, and B, we need to be able to show people in their Bible. So it's not just as simple as this is what I believe and getting that gospel out, because in many cases, as I've been shown in our congregation on occasion, that there are words in Portuguese, for example, which are synonymous with Passover, which actually means Easter in their language. And that's going to create a significant hurdle for people to understand. Okay, that's me done. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but please make sure you like, you share, you subscribe if you're on our YouTube. And if you've got any questions or comments, let me know in the comments section wherever you're watching this. Have a wonderful day. Shalom.